Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, welcome to this parallel session dedicated to the theme of plurilingual, intercultural and inclusive education. I have the great honor to coordinate and also the duty to play the role of timekeeper for this parallel session on plurilingual, intercultural and inclusive education. My name is Miriam Egli-Kuena. I was the coordinator of the Plurimobile project at the ECML. During these 55 minutes to come, we will introduce you to two initiatives of training and consultancies, the training and consultancy and 3 resources, but you will also have the opportunity to ask questions, and we look forward to entering into a dialogue with you about the needs and initiatives from the countries, the member states you represent here. The development and practice of plurilingual education is one of the Council of Europe's most important priorities. Europe is multilingual, and in order to fulfill its social and cultural aims, it seeks to provide education adapted to the needs of plurilingual citizens. Plurilingual education embraces all language learning, that is, home languages, languages of schooling, foreign languages, regional and minority languages, sign languages, and intercultural learning supports the personal growth of learners and enhances social cohesion. Developing every individual's language repertoire and cultural identities and highlighting the social value of linguistic and cultural diversity lie at the very core of the ECML work. The aim of inclusive education is to respond to the diversity of learners to the best. It means enhancing the quality of education at various levels of the curriculum, for instance, teacher education, methodologies, materials, and strengthening links with the community is also vital, since the relationship between teachers, students, parents, and society at large are crucial for developing inclusive learning environments. So, as I just said, in this session, on the one hand, we will have the opportunity to discover 2 ECML training and consultancy initiatives. The first one will be about quality education in Romani, presented by David Little. The second one about integration of sign languages into Council Europe's developments, presented by Lorraine Leeson and Christian Rattmann. On the other hand, we will discover 2 new resources from the latest ECML program, one devoted to early foreign language learning in primary school, presented by Flo Schank, and the other to learning environment optimized for and by modern languages, presented by Jonas Hérin. And you will also discover a brand new project yet to be developed, Parling, which is part or in continuity with the project présenté par Flo Schank. So we will start with the 2 training and consultancy offers. It's my pleasure to hand over to David Little.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I was right first time, but then I thought I was being summoned to the podium, which was I was standing in that embarrassed stance. The Qualirom training and consultancy begins with these 3 tools of the Council of Europe: the curriculum framework for Romani and the 2 generic European language portfolio models, one for primary and one for low secondary age learners. The curriculum framework at its heart comprises a series of grids designed on the same model as the self-assessment grid in the CFR, but running from A1 to B2 with descriptors, and there are a number of grids focused on different dimensions of language use, different contexts of language use, and different curriculum themes. And those descriptors in their themed grids provide the basis for the checklists that are at the heart of the language biography section of the two portfolios. The framework was developed around the second half of the first decade of this millennium and presented to an intergovernmental seminar in Strasbourg in 2007, and then in a revised version in 2008, and with that came the two portfolios. So that was a basic resource. And it's available from the Council of Europe website in those 7 languages. And those language versions came about partly as a result of and partly to facilitate the so-called Plurilingual project, which ran from 2010 to 2013. And this was a project funded by the European Union, but hosted here in the ECML. And it brought together Romani teachers, who were mostly Roma, from 5 different countries to develop learning materials that were based on the curriculum framework for Romani and intended to feed into use of the European language portfolio. A significant corpus of material was developed, and you can access that through the URL at the top of the screen. And this project also had a significant impact on the professional development of the Romani teachers who were involved. And when that project came to an end, the ECML took the decision to introduce a training and consultancy in order to try to build on this and not allow it to slip away from memory. So the Plurilingual training and consultancy that we've had over the last 4 years has focused essentially on introducing these tools and on top of them the Plurilingual materials in interested member states. We had only a small number of activities, 4 two-day seminars in different member states, and 1 half-day seminar here in Graz. And what we found, of course, was that we were, in each case, walking into virgin territory, because we were talking to teachers who had often not heard of the Council of Europe, hadn't heard of the Common European Framework, had no notion about the links between high political goals and values and language education and so on. And as for the ECML, who knew what that might be? So that our major task was always one of awareness raising. And we made sure that people had an enjoyable day or 2 days, depending on how it was configured, so they always sent very happy evaluations back to Graz. But during the period that we were involved with this, I became increasingly frustrated by the enormous gap that exists between the high-level human rights and values-based declarations of the Council of Europe and the ground-level operation of tools like the curriculum framework for Romani and the portfolios. So when it came to formulating the framework for a continuation of this Plurilingual training and consultancy, we thought about it in broader terms and wanted to try to fit it more obviously into the broader plurilingual framework. So a greater emphasis this time round on the concept of plurilingual and intercultural education, and what that might mean when you're trying to include Romani populations in your education system. focusing especially on primary education because that's where significant work is, as far as we know, mostly going on. This one's not going to go down well in some countries, but insisting that if you're teaching Romani in your system, it must be available to everybody and everybody must have some exposure. Otherwise, the notion that it's part of a plurilingual education is nonsense. And this will be guided by a new policy document that I and a group that I coordinated produced earlier this year, which attempts to fill the gap between the high-level human rights-based broad policy declarations and the lower level by talking about steps all the way down in policy development and implementation. And we are going to be running from Strasbourg a small pilot project to try to explore the possibilities of this kind of plurilingual policy approach in a very small number of primary schools in a handful of member states. But that is for the future, as we'll be working out how to make that project interact fruitfully with the next phase of QualiRom. That, madam, was, I think, 8 minutes, so thank you very much.
Absolument parfait, merci beaucoup. On a le temps pour une ou deux questions avant de passer à la prochaine présentation. We have time for 1 or 2 questions. S'il n'y a pas de questions. S'il n'y a pas de questions pour l'instant, je passe la parole à Lorraine Leeson et Christian Rathman.
Professor Lorraine Leeson, by introduction, and I, Christian Rathman, along with 2 other core members of the ProSign team, Tobias Haug and Beppie Bogenbogarden, who unfortunately couldn't be here with us today, will bring you through the ProScience project. Could you click on the next slide, please? Perfect, thank you.
Sorry, you have to stay there for the presentation. No?
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Hopefully everyone can understand me. ProSigns 1 and ProSigns 2 were 2 separate projects, each of a life of 4 years. So 2011 to 2015 and 2015 to 2019, bringing us to today. The goal of ProSigns being to answer 2 main questions here on the slide. One is, how can we develop CEFR-related resources that are accessible in sign languages for teachers in higher educational institutions? Also, how can we build capacity among sign language teachers regarding pedagogy, assessment in light of historical suppression of these languages and the few opportunities for deaf people to access formal education as sign language teachers. So Professor Little explained the project with the Romani community, and the parallels are incredible. I think that we have very overlapping case studies within various minority communities in Council of Europe states and beyond, because traditionally you don't have higher education in these languages, and therefore you have a incapacitated community, and it's very, very hard to kind of build them from the ground up in terms of these institutional frameworks.
So the aim, what we wanted to achieve, so we have the Council of Europe, and we have actually the field out there, the language education, so how to bring these together. And if we look at CEFR, it's really important that we have all these policies documents, because, you know, there's very little known about sign language and teaching sign language, and there's little mention of sign language. So we need to take these and then match it actually to sign language education for those learners and their assessment of how to teach sign language. So this morning, it was an absolutely fascinating discussion. So we have now the CEFR, and this is now fully integrated with sign languages. As you know, spoken languages and sign languages are equal. And so we proposed to actually include this as well. So we are very happy that this opportunity has been given by ECML and the Council of Europe to move this forward and to actually give visual exposure to sign language. And we see that this has all been changed. So, and the next step, the first step was the CEFR and the ELP. And so we have been working on that, and we've been trying to actually, with this language portfolio, to actually incorporate the experiences of those teachers in sign language in the different countries to how to actually do that with their learners. And if deaf people want access to this information, they cannot access this information through spoken language. So we need to provide it in sign language. So that information is now provided on the website of the Council of Europe and ECML in International Sign. So information through sign language has been achieved. It's me again. All right. So we have had numerous project meetings. We have network meetings, workshops, which have been very instrumental. And the first step that we wanted to look at is what is actually happening in Europe. What is involved? And we always said, oh, there's only a maximum number of people who can actually attend these meetings, because this was the meeting space we actually had the meetings in. So we were always stuck because many people wanted to attend. So we thought we had to do a separate solution and have a separate conference organized where we can actually take what we learned from the workshop meetings to a greater conference. So that meant that we could actually feedback with the community and discuss what happened in the workshops with the greater community in Europe and bring all those ideas back to our work. And so we can not just have that discussion as an elite group, but actually move it forward, including all our partners in Europe. Because the deaf community feels, you know, it's their project. That's important.
So this is a beautiful example of that parallel conference, which happened at the University of Belgrade. It was very, very well attended last year in 2018. Our philosophy of working together, like Lorraine said, was not to, you know, stay in our ivory towers and then disseminate, you know, the golden reaps of our research. It's a back and forth process with the grassroots community. It's bottom up, it's top down. So that's one way that we've gone forward in working together with our stakeholders. And also we've worked, of course, with different institutions and universities to develop ideas and put them together with the experience of our stakeholders. So I've done work at my own university, Lorraine's done work at her university, along with the work of the universities of our other two colleagues, and we've really weaved our different experiences from different countries together to develop the fruit of our work. In terms of looking at the impact of our work, you have to realize that the sign language community and deaf people are very disadvantaged. An increased awareness of the community of sign languages was, in fact, one of the first goals of the ProSign project. We wanted to elevate the status of sign language teachers to be of the same level of teachers of other foreign languages or other languages. The research to do with L2 languages in sign languages is very, very little. But oftentimes you can't find the teachers. And so we thought we need to start somewhere. So we looked for these people. We did some research on sign language teaching, learning, and assessment. Lorraine's university, along with my own university, conducted focus groups with our students who were using these tools that we had developed throughout the project. And Lorraine, this morning, was a part of a very, very special event hosted by the Council of Europe, and a lot of us in this room were there, and it was incredibly successful. I'm still kind of processing what happened because I think it was monumental. And so that in itself is a success of the ProSign project and of our collaboration with ECML. So it's not only spoken language and sign languages coming together, it's becoming modality neutral, modality inclusive. So, and I'll give you an example of what this is. So the traditional way of teaching foreign languages, which now has become a term that, well, we're no longer using anymore apparently, is looking at different competences, right? Competence related to listening, to speaking, to reading, to writing, right? And through our work, looking at the CEFR and the CV and including sign languages, it changes the whole paradigm in terms of how we consider language in general. Language is not always related to speaking and listening. If we consider ourselves open to all languages, then we must be modality neutral. We need to think about things like the production of language, the reception of language, right? And we've had an impact on the Council of Europe itself and on policies throughout the member states.
So wrapping it all together, what have we produced? So there are several resources. First of all, an assessment guide with test examples for, classroom-based and other types of testing, so the learners can use that assessment measures, and the teachers have access to this as well. Then the European Language Portfolio, the ELP. So to make it visual for sign language learners and encourage the students to also become motivated and to be involved with this learning process. and on their own to be autonomous in their learning. And then thirdly, a lister of teacher competences. So the sign language teachers, and I wanted to say thank you to Lucas in the back and his project and his project team and all the work that they've done on competencies. So we actually borrowed from their work. So we shared what deaf teachers were doing, and we built on what Lucas's project was doing, and we kept on building on top of our learned experiences. So we can actually move this forward for the sign language teachers and help them develop their competences. Then fourthly, so more information about SEFR. What does that mean for the sign language teachers and how they could apply this? So not just being a concept that they would understand on paper, but actually how to, make it from a theoretical framework into putting it into practice. So that's really a process that we have gone through, and then work in progress still. And on the right-hand side, you can see again, what that means. We have produced it in international sign, this information. So we hope that other countries and the member states will actually now translate it into their own national sign languages.
And the slide that we just saw, which was from 2016, and this was the first publication from ProSigns. As of today, we have translated this into 8 different sign languages. I thought it was 7, but somebody has just given me, Norway, thank you very much, has just given me a translation in Norwegian Sign Language. I can single out Hilde. I was just telling them thanks to you because you had translated the materials into Norwegian Sign Language, so thanks again. Also, yesterday, the Slovenian minister had announced that they have already taken some of the work from the ProSign project, and also the Minister for Education in the Czech Republic has taken this information. So it's already out there and being used. So we'll close our intervention with some next steps. First of all is continuing our work with the Council of Europe in disseminating this far and wide in international sign as well. We don't have, so that we thank the Council of Europe for their support in being able to undertake this work. Also continuing our work with the language portfolio, with the ELP, because with modern language learning, with the expectations of modern students, this becomes very, very important. The proficiency of an expertise of sign language education needs real investment, and that's what we're here to do. We also aim to impact all deaf children who all have the human right to use sign language. Sign languages, okay? So in whatever context they're in. So this is within the plurilingual, pluricultural framework that we've all placed ourselves within. And we're also looking to have a political impact on a European level. We want to be able to see how sign languages are making their mark. And one way that we expect that to happen is for an inclusion of sign languages in the European Charter for Minority Languages. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup pour cette présentation fascinante. Sometimes simultaneous translation on both sides. We have time for one question. Yes?
I'm interested
I'm interested a little bit in a little more about those links between the projects for sign language and for Roma language. I know this was mentioned, but maybe if you tell me a little more about what exactly those parallels were, I'd be very interested in that.
I'm happy to go first, and then David, if you want to add something. And this is just something I've learned from your presentation, David, that we're basically on the same track. And the similar aspects, the things that really echoed for me is that the communities are not supported structurally. So there's no promotion of them to use their own language, right? So that's very, very similar, and that has an impact on health. That has an impact on education. That has an impact on employment. That has an impact on information, on media. So on a real fundamental level, the communities themselves are disadvantaged from day one. So if we're trying to provide institutional support to deaf communities and to Roma communities, the pathway and the steps of providing that support are the same. We need to make sure that sign language people and communities using Roma languages understand their own rights and are given those basic rights before they can reach the levels that we want them to reach. And that includes a heck of a lot of work, to put it frankly.
Yes. I absolutely agree, of course, with what Christian's just said. Really only two things. More or less in parallel, I became involved with deaf education in Ireland, and through the Council of Europe's Language Policy Division, attempts to develop language supports to facilitate the inclusion of Romani children and adolescents in national education systems. And from an early stage, it was obvious to me what Christian has just said, that you're dealing with two fundamentally excluded communities where the possibility of education is cut off at a very early level. There is one important difference between the challenge of Romani communities and the challenge of deaf communities, and that has to do with the variability with which Romani communities have retained their language. There are populations, for example, in East Slovakia, significant populations of children who speak their version of Romani at home and don't speak Slovakian. So their educational inclusion is a massive thing, but still for the future. There are other Romani populations where they've lost the language several generations ago, but especially if they're part of what used to be Yugoslavia, they have historical rights to so-called language education, which is usually about an hour a week of fairly primitive grammar translation instruction. Between those two rather extreme sociolinguistic situations, you've got an infinite variation, or graduation rather, of language loss. So dealing with all those variable situations within a broadly plurilingual context is quite a challenge. And that's what we're hoping to find out part of in this pilot project I briefly referred to at the end of my presentation.
Sorry, if I can just quickly respond to what you've said, David. We also have a difference that I failed to mention. One of the biggest differences is that the deaf community, 90 to 95% of us are born into hearing families. And so the question of how we accurately can describe what language exposure means to deaf children and what full acquisition of a language is in terms of those deaf children is very, very different. we're trying to work and negotiate with the medical profession, who tends to have first contact, and that, in brief, is a very, very significant difference.
Thank you very much also for these comments. So once again, thank you. We will move on to the next subject, children's language learning, l'apprentissage des langues chez les enfants.
Thank you, Miriam. I'm very pleased to present you now the results of a 2.5-year project called ILI, which stands as an acronym for Inspiring Language Learning in the Early Years. And what you see before you is 1/5 of a team of 5 people, incredible people, which I want to welcome from here. Just a brief short this project, ILI, has been born out of a think tank about early language learning in December 2016, which brought together language experts from different ECML member states, from other European countries, and from Canada, to discuss challenges and opportunities related to early language learning. And the participants expressed their strong commitment to plurilingual and intercultural education from a very early age on. Another important aspect that was expressed was the importance of recognizing and valorizing linguistic repertoires of both children and teachers. And a third very important aspect for us to guide us through the project was the importance of a continuous and integrated approach towards language learning, which include different languages, different subjects, and also different educational stages, in our case meaning pre-primary and primary education. So let me just mention the age group we are targeting. When we're talking about early language learning, this can mean different things. In our case, the age group we're targeting is the children aged 3 to 12, because we wanted to take into consideration the different contexts in the different member states when children enter at a primary level. And there were 2 key questions we were dealing with. The first one is, we have been playing a lot with this word inspiring. Why does it matter to make early language learning inspiring? Those of you who have children on their own or have been working with young children at a daily level exactly know what I'm talking about. You can have very fabulous resources. If you do not succeed in touching your children, in motivating your children, it's very difficult, it's a long way. So we really ask ourselves why it is so important to make language learning inspiring. And then the second question, as important as the first one, is what does it look like, this inspiring language learning? The word inspiring, the term inspiring, in fact has a double signification. It means, on the one hand, it's for us, we want to encourage professionals working with young children, teachers, educators, to inspire their children by giving them many, many opportunities to discover and to learn languages. And you can see on the pictures what we mean by giving them many, many opportunities. We really want to stress the fact that language is part of every learning scenario. And then we have the second one, where you see we also invite teachers to be inspired by looking at how children discover and learn languages. This is the second core thought, which leads like a fil rouge throughout the whole project. And the output of the project, of this 2.5 years project, is a website. And we wanted it from the very beginning to be as clear, as simple, and as easy accessible as possible, because we really wanted to give the teachers something they can work with on a daily basis. And so our motto was, thanks to Jacob, less is more. From the very beginning, we were guided by this principle. So in the heart of the project, you find these try this attempt to give an answer to the question, why does it matter to make early language learning inspiring, and what does it look like? Then you have the context. We tried to put the project into the larger European context and European language policies. And then we have three core aspects: the guiding principles, the inspiring practices, and the quiz and facts. And I want to come back to it later in a little bit more detail. Then you have the links and further reading, which further explore this idea of why does it matter to make it inspiring? And we have a glossary in order to create an attempt to create some common understanding of what we mean by this inspiring early language learning. This ILI project, to me and to my team, is a true ECML project because it can be used in different educational contexts, and thus enabling us to cross borders and to create a common understanding of what matters in the context of early language learning. Because whether you work in a context with one dominant language or in a more multilingual context, or whether you are a second language teacher or foreign language teacher or even a subject teacher, you find ideas that may inspire teaching and learning in your classrooms. Because, how is this possible? We focused on what is common to all contexts, the children in our classrooms and the resources they bring with them, what they already know, what they want to know, what they need to progress further. And this point of view creates a common ground which allows us to cross borders. And we made this very strong experience at a very early stage of the project when we had this incredible workshop here in Graf with participants from different member states, and when it became clear very quickly that when we focus on children, we can abandon, not forget about, but we can abandon a little bit our didactical discussions about second language learning, foreign language learning, and we can create a common ground of understanding. So just a quick word about these guiding principles, because they are really the basis for this common understanding. We run through a lot of scientific texts, we discussed with a lot of teachers, and we agreed on these 6 guiding principles. Language learning actively relies on the linguistic repertoires of each child. It is holistic. Language can be found in every subject. It's meaningful, it has to make sense to children. So we're looking at interests, at talents, and also at subjects that may be of interest. It is active. We consider children as active, autonomous learners and teachers, consequently, as co-constructors of learning and meaning. Language learning is an ongoing process. It doesn't start with a child entering my classroom. It has begun a long time ago, and it will continue after he has left me or us or our school. And of course, it's continuous and integrated. Just one word about inspiring practices. They are meant to fill with life these guiding principles. And we have 2 categories. On the one hand, we have inspiring stories, stories of successful language learning from different contexts. And on the other hand, we have resources of inspiring language learning, for example, a selection of multilingual books or a selection of books without text, or even a treasure box with very small activities that can be implemented very easily in your daily classrooms. 3 age groups, 3 to 6, 6 to 9, and 9 to 12. And this is very important, this selection of activities you find on a website and the selection of articles is non-representative. It's only meant to illustrate the core ideas of the project. And it's an invitation to teachers to look at them and to say, oh, maybe there's some differences to my context, but I can take out some ideas I can implement in my context. And you will see they are very open, and they are really designed to shift mindsets so that you can really use them in a lot of contexts. Quiz and Facts has been well received by the participants. It invites you, teachers and educators and other interested people, to reflect on personal ideas, attitudes about languages and language learning. For example, you can see 2 examples there. My mother tongue is all I need, so you can decide whether this is myth or fact. And answer questions in relation to managing linguistically and culturally diverse contexts. For example, teachers often ask us, but how do I do this with all the languages I have? How can I give room to them and fulfill the mission I have as a teacher concerning the language of schooling? So this is all I have to say. I hope you visit the website, you let yourself inspire, and maybe inspire others. Thank you so much. Yes. And we were so incredibly lucky to get a new project so that we can continue the one we have already developed, and we called it Moving Beyond ILI, from ILI to Paling. And you will see the language of the project will switch. The main language will be French, because this is also my first language. So Paling means parcours linguistique, language pathways of young children make early language learning visible. And it extends in a way ILI's reflections by seeking answers to the question how the learning that is made possible through ILI can be made visible. This is an aspect we wanted to treat in ILI, but given the short time we had, we didn't succeed in doing so. So Paling supports professionals in identifying, understanding, supporting, and documenting young children's learning. And we really want also to deal with this sometimes very controversial question of evaluation when it comes to young children's learning. We want to deal with questions about formative, certificative, summative evaluation, and maybe, hopefully, we succeed like we did in ILI to move beyond this discussion and to discover some common ground which we can all share, whether we come from a more formative context or from a more certificative perspective. So, and I now really invite you to promote the project in your networks, because one of the reasons we wanted a 4-year project is we wanted from the very beginning to exchange with teachers. And we will have a webinar in March to launch our project, where we want to collect as many questions, as many good practices as possible, so that we can really build our project on needs, on questions, on concerns of teachers and educators. We didn't have a think tank anymore, so we needed to create our own think tank in a way. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I hope you will accept the invitation, Flora's invitation, and we will pass directly to the presentation of EOL.
Thank you very much, Miriam. Good morning. Hello, everyone. I was not sure if I should use French or English. I try to do it in English. Maybe it's easier, especially because of the online conference. Okay, so. One fact about learning environments and one starting point of the EOL project was that education policies do not evolve as quickly as technology. If you think about gaming, if you think about social networks, about data protection issues, we really have to empower actors in education, empower schools to help them find their own solution for the evolution of society. And that's the main aim of the EOL project. So, here's the project. So we based our approach on a very simple definition of learning environments based on 3 keywords, which are culture, which means events, values, and content; structure, which are organization, fundings, and equipment, but also people, of course, networking, partnerships, personal and professional development. And so we worked with more than 100 schools from 19 countries to set up a new approach on language learning environments. And as you can see on the different photos here, you can easily see how the cultural, the structural, and the personal impacts plays a major role for learning environments. It is very important to connect language education to the way we share values, to foster democratic citizenship and social cohesion, and to develop 21st century skills. This is culture. Structure. You have different approaches on the way you can use all learning fields. You can see here on the top left of this slide the way a school uses stairs to implement language and cultural diversity. But you also have to reflect on the way you fund project, you fund mobility project, for example, or the way you can use traditional devices, as you can see on the right bottom side of this slide, or the way you can equip a school with digital devices. This is structure. And people, you have to take into account the way you can develop the network of a school, the way you can support cooperation within the school, between learners and teachers, between learners and the whole staff of the school, how you can include parents within the approach of the school and the education policy of the school, and the way you can foster individual or collective agency. And that's the reason why EOL is at the center of the combination of formal, informal, and non-formal learning. And we try to develop this systemic approach by basing the way we reflected on this project on the ecological model of Yuri Bronfenbrenner, an American psychologist. And we try to help stakeholders to take into account 4 levels of education: the learner, the teacher, the school, and the school system. These are the 4 levels, the key levels we took into account. And you have to combine these 4 levels with 5 entries of language education. And we have chosen these entries with the factorial model of language acquisition from Britta Hufeisen from the Technische Universität Darmstadt. And you will see here these 5 entries are communication, valuing languages, the way you assess languages, or the way you value language diversity, intercultural approach, learning pathways, and of course everyday languages. If you combine these 5 entries and these 4 levels, you will come to this grid with 20 fields. And I have to say it right now, we do not expect from any school to cover up all 20 fields of this grid. But this is a table that can be used by school to identify their strength and to focus on their priorities. Here are the 20 fields. On the website, you can click on every field and find resources, find information, find examples from the school, from our network. For example, if for you the priority is to foster cohesion within the school and within the school community, you could choose to have the field 3.1 as a priority, and you could maybe lean on a strength of the environment, of the global environment of the school. For example, on the field 5.3, which is based on linguistic landscapes in the city. So this, what we call the matrix of EOL, is about reconnecting things. We try to overcome all disconnections of educational systems or of school environments. We set up an online training platform based on 7 steps. You can find them here. And these 7 steps can be used in a very flexible way. You start by an initial assessment, and you end up with a language policy at the school level, or even more at the territorial level. And you you will find on the website various tools and resources to set up a whole school language policy. This global and systemic approach, and also the way to use your strength in order to tackle some issues, so this symbiotic approach can be illustrated with this slide, where you can see the way we can offer support for schools. You will find tools to help you to develop networks. You will find also tools to foster professional development or quality approach or project management. On the website, you can find this magnificent girandola, which was suggested by our Italian colleagues, with 6 entries. We have 52 different tools to offer, 17 memos, 43 examples, research abstracts, and an online training platform. And EOL is now entering the training and consultancy offer of the ECML, and I must say you will have the chance to meet a fantastic team. Like Flor just said, we are 4 people working on this project, and a 5th person is joining us for this training and consultancy offer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this last presentation, and thank you to all the speakers for the presentations of this project, which all share the dimension of valuing resources in order to promote plurilingual, intercultural, and inclusive education. So now I think we have time for 2 questions, maybe, either to Jonas or Flor, or to both.
Hi, I'm Karolina Inho from the Finnish National Agency for Education. And first of all, I'd like to thank Flor for a very nice and useful workshop we had in Finland this spring, was it? Yes, and the ECML in general for all the TNC events we've got to host. Your new project is about documenting the learning pathways of very young children. And on your slide, you had that you want to support professionals in the documentation of young language learners. But how does that go together with the ELP and really developing the European language portfolio for young learners?
It's a very good question, thank you. This will be, the ELP will for certain be a very important tool in this project, because it is one means that we can use to make this language learning visible. I have to confess, this project is at a very, very early stage. We didn't even have our first team meeting, so maybe it would be very, there are a lot of things I need to discuss with my team, but of course, and this is, we all agreed about, and I think it goes without speaking, that the ELP will be an existing tool we can rely on and maybe help to give further input to bring it, to develop it further, if there is a need, if we detect a need for it. So, but all in time.
Hello, my name is Bessie Dendrinos, and I'm representing here the European Civil Society Platform for Multilingualism. I wanted, first of all, in terms of EOL, to say a warm congratulations. I'm really impressed with the project, and I think that it's really an interesting aspect, because there are, in terms of language learning, particularly the big languages, there is so much language learning going on outside of school, and it is not taken into consideration within the school context. So I'm really happy to see your project, and I wish you good luck for the further. In relation to the early language learning, I wanted to ask you whether you're considering taking into consideration how to address parents. I'm saying this because in my other hat, I live in Greece, and I'm professor at the University of Athens. We were commissioned to introduce a national project to introduce the first foreign language from the first primary grade. And at the beginning, there were so many different kinds. When children are young, parents have a really strong influence in the kind of learning that is taking place. And we faced a lot of difficulties with parents themselves and how they were intervening in the school process. So we created a sub-project with parents, and we're giving them advice as to how to deal with it, and they felt that they had some control over it. And within 2 years, attitudes of parents that were really inhibiting in some ways changed a lot, and we felt that it had a very great impact on the project, on teachers and children themselves. So I was wondering if you're...
Thank you very much for your contribution. This is a topic, for example, in the country I come from, it is very, very actual for the moment. I'm working a lot of it, and all the members of the team feel very strong about it. So given to this short duration of the project, we had to put the focus on, or we had to focus on a target group, but we designed the activities or the learning scenarios, the stories you see on the website. They are designed in a way that you can use them with parents. And I, for example, I used some of these activities in my work with parents. But as we are now given the opportunity to continue as a team and to continue our project, and given the principles, holistic, continuous language learning, coherent, including all languages, all language learning and acquisition settings, so the parents will play an important part in this, especially when it comes to making visible language learning pathways. You need to include the different perspectives in order to keep it, to enlarge this perspective as much as possible. So thank you very much. You gave us once again, Willie, this feedback that this is very important to do it.
So thank you very much. I think we can continue the discussion during the coffee break. So thanks again to the presenters, and yes.